welcome to the LSAT Hacks Webinar on studying when you've just got a few weeks out before an LSAT test date. And so this is basically the point where you start feeling pressure, but you do still actually have enough time left to make a meaningful difference. And so in this webinar, I'm just going to talk about a few things you can do, both to sort of prevent any problems and then to make the most of your remaining time. Because one thing that I see often in intakes is that people will be studying for a few months and then something will go wrong and they won't do very well on the test and have to retake. And it's usually like a small avoidable thing. So I think that's actually the most important thing to cover now, because you can still make progress in upping your PT score, but your biggest goal, if you're already like roughly in the range where you want to be, is not having some screw up that takes you out of the game. So the first thing is don't burn out. And all these things that I'm going to mention are things that apply to like a percentage of people. So this may not apply to you, but then the next one may. So burnout, how you can tell if you're burning out is, you're at the end of your study period, your scores have kind of plateaued or even going down. You feel like sort of lethargic, maybe like you feel more stressed than usual. Stuff that you normally could do is not working, like, I don't know, you just are like clumsy around the house, or it's like hard to do your daily tasks. But the main thing LSAT wise that you would see is if your scores are actually starting to drop. If that's happening, then like that's a serious thing and you should take just like a few days off immediately if you're in that thing. Whereas if you're merely stalled, then you just want to like more self-assess and think like, am I burnt out, or is this just I don't know how to improve? And if it's just don't know how to improve, then you'll just do the sort of stuff I'm going to talk about later to get better. But if you are feel stalled because you're burned out, then you should also take time off. Now this seems counterintuitive because people are like, well, there's only 3 weeks left. How do I take time off? But the thing is, if your problem is that you're too stressed, then time off is work towards getting better at the LSAT. It's not like time away from working on the LSAT. It actually is how you get better at it. Because I've heard from so many people who say, well, yeah, I just took time off and then all of a sudden things improved. This is, again, if you're burned out. But basically just know that like you've got the time to restore yourself if that's the case, and that throwing more work at it won't solve it if you're burned out. That can be a bit of a big topic, so I'm not going to go like more into it today. But generally speaking, unless someone has a specific question later. But generally speaking, you also need to, even if you're not burning out, in order to test it, just make sure like you're sleeping, make sure you're eating well, make sure you're still going out and getting sunlight and exercise and all that. Because this really matters for LSAT and on test day. You need to be in good physical and mental shape, and sleep and exercise and all of that are what let you do that. Okay, the second big mistake that I see is that people, let's see here. People don't read the rules for LSAT test day and something goes wrong. So I'm sending a message here of the LSAT day of test rules. The rules on test day are really strict. You have to pay close attention to them and follow them to the letter, or you could have trouble or your score might get thrown out. For example, one big one is you can't bring a cell phone to the test center, or a digital watch. So if you've got like an Apple Watch or an Android watch, you can't have that either. No phone, no communications device. So for example, if you would normally take an Uber, you can't do that. You can get an Uber on the way there, but on the way back you have to get someone call an Uber for you, or call a cab from a payphone or a reception or something. And this isn't, I've actually seen posts about this. People are like, I don't know how to call a cab. Should I bring my cell phone to the test day and like hide it in a bush? Is like what someone actually said they did. Don't do that. Just bring some cash and write down a cab company's number and you'll be okay. But yeah, no phones. The other big one, a lot of people practice with like earplugs. No earplugs. You can't have a mechanical pencil. That's another big mistake people make. You can't have any scrap paper. And there's a very specific list of things you can have in a Ziploc bag that you can bring with you. So you should read over this list, and for your last few prep tests, I think you should practice using this Ziploc bag. So in the bag, you can have like a beverage container that's like plastic, I think, up to 591 milliliters. So you can choose between like water or something else like juice or coffee or what have you. You can have a snack. You can have an eraser without a sleeve, wooden pencils, a highlighter. I think that's pretty much it. Let me just see. I don't know if I forgot anything major, but don't listen to me. Listen to this. Right. Listen to this. Oh, you can have a pencil sharpener, tissues, and keys, wallet, valid ID, and feminine hygiene or medical products. If you had some medical product, might be a good idea to bring a prescription. I'm actually not sure. On that point, I would call LSAC if it's like, some essential thing. But that's the only list of things you can have. And then I've got a long list of things you can't have. So don't mess around with this. Read the rules and practice with them, because what I find is sometimes people study for months, but they've never actually practiced for what test day is like. Because when you take a 4-section test that's like 2.5 hours long, that's not LSAT test day. LSAT test day, you show up like a bit before your test time, whereas, when you take a prep test, you just start when you start. But on LSAT test day, you're going to be there somewhat before, because you're not going to just walk in 2 minutes beforehand. Then you've got to listen to them read the instructions. You've got to fill out that little answer sheet where they ask like your name and your social insurance number and all that stuff. And I think they sort of read out the instructions for how to do it, so it takes a while. Then they distribute all the materials, and then you have 3 sections and then a break, because you've got an experimental section somewhere in, it could be any of the 5 sections, but if you do a 4-section test, you'd normally do like 2 sections, break, 2 sections. On test day, it's 3 sections, break, 2 sections. So that adds 35 minutes. And then after that, you've got an essay and stuff. So it's a longer time. So you may find that like you have to use the washroom, that you get hungry, that you get thirsty, that you crave caffeine or cigarettes. Any of these things, these like base physical needs, could screw you up. Now, they're not like incredibly challenging things. You just have to actually plan for it. So let's say you get your Ziploc bag together and you simulate a test with like 5 sections, and then you have a bit of time beforehand where like you can't eat or use the washroom or anything. And it turns out that when you go through that, you have to pee. Well, what you should do is just drink less water in the run up to test day and practice using the washroom less. And your body with the 3 weeks left has enough time to adapt. Or if you get thirsty, then make sure you bring some water or other things. And whatever issue comes up, you can deal with it, but you have to actually practice this test day format beforehand to make sure that there's not anything. So that's the second thing. That's the third thing. So the first one was don't burn out and monitor yourself and just generally take care of yourself. Second was read the test day rules and make sure that you've got everything in order. Third was actually practice according to these, and then if any issues come up, deal with them. And the last one is test day panic is like the last big thing that I hear. And you probably know enough about yourself to know whether or not you're prone to like anxiety attacks or stress or not. But either way, I think it's a good thing to just sort of pay attention to your stress level, because we all have like little things in our life that like cause our stress level to rise, and mostly we don't notice them because the stress isn't too severe. But maybe like someone cuts you off in traffic, or someone like insults you, or I don't know, like, or you get like a bad email, or it's like small things that like don't matter too much, but they raise your stress level. A helpful exercise is to just pay attention to things in your everyday life that are raising your stress level. And then when you notice one, you sort of take a couple breaths and contextualize it. What this will do is it'll actually train you in the skill of mindfulness, so that when you get to test day, you can take a couple of breaths and contextualize whatever caused you stress. Because often the trigger for something like a spiraling anxiety might be just you see like a long question and your brain panics at seeing the long question. But you know rationally that seeing a long question is not actually like, obviously there's long questions on the LSAT, that's not new information that should frighten your brain. So if you see that and you notice yourself getting worried, just like take a few breaths and like talk to yourself. You're like, oh no, that's normal. Just because it's long doesn't mean it's hard, and worst case I can skip it and go on to the next question or whatever reassures you. But just practice noticing the small stuff so it doesn't spiral into the big stuff. And do remember also that though test day is important, law schools only take the highest score, so you don't have to worry about screwing up. In other words, you would prefer to succeed, but I find the body can treat the LSAT like a life and death phenomenon. So it's like either you pass the LSAT today or you die. Because that's how school exams work. I mean, you don't die. But in school exams, you don't get a makeup exam. If you flunk the exam, then you get like a D in the class, and that's that. But that is not the LSAT. On the LSAT, you get to try again, and it's really not a big deal. So it's also helpful to just try and kind of talk to your brain and tell it, like, look, we want to do well on this, but it's not actually that important. It's only September, and we can take this again if we need to. Doesn't mean you're planning to fail, but this is just like a bit of self-talk you can do before the test to contextualize. So like, this isn't a school exam. You do get a second shot at it. You can take it multiple times. The schools really do not care. Someone asks, do we get a break before writing section? No. At least I don't believe so. I believe it's just a 1 15-minute break after 3 sections, and you have 3 more sections, 2 regular LSAT ones, and writing. Someone asks, can you take the LSAT 3 times? The colleges look down on it. Yes, you can. You can in fact take it more than 3 times. You can take it as many times as you want now they changed the policy. Now, at some point in the future, maybe schools will adjust to this and stop looking at highest. In other words, if someone like took the LSAT 20 times and they finally got a 170, but they had, a bunch of lower scores and it looked like the 170 was sort of like a fluke, and then someone else took it like 2 times and they got a 165. At some point, the schools might start to say, like, hold on, maybe this 165 is better than that 170. But we're absolutely not at that stage right now. That's very hypothetical. You'll hear about it if it happens. Currently, schools just look at the highest score because that's how they're ranked in the U.S. News and World Report. So when the admissions officer is looking at your file, that high score is what boosts the school's ranking. And if the admissions officer is turning away scores that boost the school's ranking, they're not going to get very good job performance reviews. So even if the school says they average, that's just, I don't know why they say it, but it's not what they do. Because it's the high score that determines their metrics. Just like, you care about admission and scholarships, they care about the high LSAT score. That's their metric that brings them success in life. There's like, if you're retaking for the 5th time and you already have a good score, then yeah, maybe I wouldn't. But if it's your first time and you get a 152 and then you get a 170 next time, like, you're fine. That really doesn't matter. Okay. Any questions on any of that before I move on to sort of more topic-specific stuff? Okay. Actually, someone has asked, how many hours do you suggest we study every day until a September exam? I'm going to talk about this just because it relates to the burnout that I already raised. I think, generally speaking, most people don't have more than like 4 productive hours in them. And so you're working a job, you probably have less than 4 productive hours to do in the LSAT. So my answer to this actually is as many hours as you can do until you start draining yourself of energy, but bearing in mind that I don't think you can do 8 productive hours a day. You could probably sit in front of an LSAT book for 8 hours a day, but I don't think you're really active on it. Now, mind you, let's say you study for 2 hours, have lunch, and then study for 2 more hours, and the lunch took an hour and a half. Technically, you've been doing LSAT stuff for 5.5 hours, but that's not 5.5 hours work. There were 4 hours of work in there. So when I say 4 hours, I really mean like 4 hours in a block. But that's a good limit, I think, and possibly less. And it's not a bad idea to take one day off a week. You might be able to do more than 4 hours if you take one day off a week, though. Okay, so that's like error prevention. Actually, one more error prevention thing. Just double check like your test ticket and check that it matches your ID. So if you're John A. Smith on the test ticket, but you're John Smith on your ID, or if you're Jon John on your test ticket, but you're John on your ID, just double check that there's nothing funny like that. And if there is, then call LSAC and ask them what to do. You don't want to be turned away from just for a stupid reason like that. Someone asks, how long did I have to study to score 177? I'll just answer this quickly before I get to the next section. I think with a lot of tutors, it's sort of an unusual case where they were just good at the LSAT, and so it's not very instructive for people studying. But I studied for about 3 months, and I think my starting score was about a 165. I say I think because I just went to the local bookstore and bought a Kaplan book. That's what was there at the time. And at that time that I was studying, they didn't use real LSAT questions, so I didn't actually take an official exam when I was doing my prep. I did some practice questions from LSAC, but I guess most of the material I took would have been Kaplan invented material, which is not what I recommend. But it's not useless. It just isn't the best thing, and there's no reason to use it. But I studied for about 3 months, and in the last month I studied more intensely and I did more logic games because they were my worst section when I first started. And so I just did them over and over, and they're the section that you're most able to cram on to get better at. And so I was able to in that way. But I think the more interesting answer to this question is actually what happened after I got the 170. Because when I got the 170, not 170, 177, when I got the 177, I was able to do it, but it was sort of a struggle. And I could get the right answer, but I couldn't exactly tell you why all the time, and it felt stressful. But then I started working teaching the LSAT and just answering all these questions, and I started seeing the same questions over and over again because people had asked about the hard ones. And in the process of talking to people about the test and repeating material, then I got a lot better, and I was able to say quickly why something was right or wrong. In other words, go faster and explain myself. And by the way, if people have questions, can you use the Q&A area instead of the chat area? It's just easier to track. There's a separate Q&A thing. I will answer the ones that are in the chat, but I just want to make sure that I get to them. Yeah, so I think repeating material and talking to people about it were what really made the difference for me, rather than pure time. But about 3 months. Okay, so for focusing on getting better in the last 3 weeks, first of all, someone asked, how much can we realistically increase our score? And this is a good question. If you are 12 points away from where you need to be, then don't take it in September. Take it later. There are no LSAT miracles, and if your prep test average is way below where you need to be, it's not going to magically jump. So we're talking about a few points increase is what's feasible, unless of course you just started studying, then you can increase more. But if you just started studying, I would still recommend studying longer because you can make even more improvement. But we're talking about a few points, not 10 points, not 15 points, not 20 points. If you're that far below it, then you've got to defer. You can keep trying and you can just withdraw 2 days before. Sometimes you do improve more rapidly, but that's roughly where you should be thinking about. And what you should do is assess where you're at. So first of all, what are you getting on each section? The lower your logic game score, the better, in the sense that if you have to improve a lot on reading comp, then that just may not be feasible in 3 weeks. It can happen, but it's less likely than with logic games, which are the most improvable. And if you're low on logic games, I would just cram logic games, repeat logic games, and keep doing that for 3 weeks. Pardon me, I'm just going to have to... thought I was going to have to sneeze. All right. And logical reasoning is a bit in the middle. I would actually recommend using a score tracking tool like 7 Stages, where you can see like what you're getting on each question type, like what rate, and if there's any to drill, because some question types are easier to improve on. For example, sufficient assumption is easier. I find parallel reasoning, if you drill a bunch of parallel reasoning and redo them and look for structure, you can learn to get faster and better at them. And I think flaw questions can be improved on as well, because the biggest problem people have with flaw questions is they don't understand what the answers mean. And if you understand the answers, it gets easier. So if you redo flaw questions and really analyze every wrong answer, because the wrong answers repeat, if you do that, then you can get better at flaw. But yeah, I would just try and be like hyper specific about what you need to work on, and then I would drill that. I would redo questions from that, and I would really try and analyze what's going on, because you can make improvements in like a discrete area. I'm just going to answer a few questions here. So people asked, how many prep tests a week? I would say like usually 1 prep test a week is best, because there's not enough time to analyze them if you do more than that. You can do time sections, but anecdotally 1 prep test a week seems to be the right amount. So that would mean like 3 or something in a run up to this one. You could do like a little bit more potentially, but don't do, like some people talk about like a prep test every 2 days. Like that's way overkill. Someone asked about the hump between 170 and 175 plus. You know, I actually don't. Just trying to think of like how you clear that hump. I would instead talk about like characteristics of people that are scoring 175 plus. I'd say one of the biggest differences is that a lot of stuff that people think about when they do questions just happens automatically when you're at the highest score levels. You know, sometimes people ask me like, how often do you negate answers on necessary assumption questions? And the honest answer is, I don't even think about it. I just look at a thing and I know what it means and I know what the negation is. Every sentence that I hear in my life, I already know the negation automatically. And I think that's true of most people that are 175 plus scorers. Whereas if you're like sitting there and you have to consciously negate something, then that means you understand the concept, but it's not intuitive. And I think the biggest determining factor in getting over that hump is whether or not all the skills that you've learned and read about in books are operating at the level of intuition, or if you have to stop and like rationally use them. The best people have proper habits at an intuitive level. And how you get there is a harder question, and I am not in a position to answer that like exactly right now, though, and I'll talk about it a bit later, but that's the challenge you've got to get to. Okay, someone asks, if we're hoping for a 10-point increase but still doing okay, should we take September? So they say if they're in the mid-160s. This is an interesting question. I guess it depends on like what kind of outcomes are acceptable. I think when you're looking at law school admissions, especially in the United States, you have to sort of like draw a line of like, I will not go below this. Because different schools have different employment outcomes, and then also there's scholarships. So in other words, like I'm hoping nobody listening to this webinar would go to Cooley Law School. The employment outcomes are just too terrible. Even if you have a full scholarship, you should not waste 3 years of your life at Cooley. And likewise, I'm guessing that everyone in this podcast, if they want to go to law school and they were offered a chance to go to Yale and they could handle the financials, then they would go. Or, you know, if you had a full scholarship to NYU or Columbia, you would go. So those are clear decisions. What you have to figure out is in between there, where's your cutoff? And it's good to define this in advance, because when you're preparing for the LSAT and you're like putting all of your energy into this, you can fall into the fallacy of getting, say, like a 162, and it gets you into a school that is actually not that good for you. But you think, like, well, I put all this energy into the LSAT, I can't not apply to law school. But you can. This is why it's important to define in advance what's your minimum acceptable school in terms of like employment outcomes, and what's your minimum acceptable level of scholarship in terms of like total debt that you'll have at the end of the time. So, for the question of if we're still doing okay, mid-160s, what you have to ask is, if I got, say, a 165, could I get to a school with an acceptable employment outcome and an acceptable scholarship situation? If the answer is yes, then go ahead and take it. You've got nothing to lose. If the answer is no, if for like whatever life circumstance you defined, that you determine you would probably need a minimum 168 to get into a school that you want, and you're averaging 163 and like 168 just doesn't seem possible, then you shouldn't take it, not because it'll hurt you, but because it will give you like a psychological risk of thinking, well, I've got this score, it's pretty good, I've got to apply. But it's got to meet your minimum requirement. So that's the exercise I would do to think about whether to take it in September. But for admissions, it doesn't matter at all. Just the highest matters. Just looking at some questions people have asked. There's one announcement that I want to talk about just on the theme of intuition and focusing on one area. You may have seen the discount code I sent out about the 35% off. I just thought I would talk a little bit more about the mastery seminars. You can use that code that I gave for anything on my site too, by the way. So if you're scoring like in the 150s and you think you'd be better suited for the like regular LSAT course, then you can use 30% off on that. But I would say if you're scoring 160 plus and have been studying for a while, or even like the high 150s, as long as you've been studying for a while and like you know what's what with like general LSAT terms, then these are probably the better level. And in the 3 weeks that are left, I sort of like designed these courses in such a way that they can be used quickly. So they can be bought separately. Like you can just get the LG Mastery or the RC Mastery, and those cost $200. Though with a discount, it's about $125, I think. And they're about 5 hours long. So that's something you can use in like a day and then apply pretty much immediately. And the LR Mastery is 13 hours long. And I think there's a review here. I'm just going to look for it. Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized I haven't done screen sharing. This is on the recording, but it's actually not on the screen. There. Sorry about that. So just getting to a review of the LR Mastery, I think. Oh, actually, I don't know where that review went. But you see stuff like this where someone just says, like, after using it, they got like a 5-point improvement on LR. Now, it's obviously not guaranteed that you're going to get an improvement like that, but I find that if these seminars click for you, they really do make an improvement quite quickly, rather than something where, you know, people often think, do I need like 4 months for this stuff to sink in? But no, they're intended to be a quick overview of the strategies I use to do stuff in timed conditions. It's based on an existing level of LSAT knowledge, and instead I'm showing you like shortcuts and tricks in how to approach them. So what I did for these is I actually took, before I recorded the lessons, I took a bunch of material timed and took notes on what I did, you know, like when did I look at the stimulus, when did I look at the answers, how long was I spending, what factors made me choose this or that, and I took notes on that, and then I just basically walked through the questions describing those notes. So it's different than an after-the-fact explanation, where, you know, I look at a question and think, okay, what's going on here? This was actually me trying to analyze my own mind and my own approach on, like, how is a 175 plus scorer going through these questions quickly in real time? What am I doing, and how can I break that down so that students can learn from that and mimic it? So that's the general theme of all the mastery seminars, and right now there's a 35% off discount code intended to let you use them before test day, because if you haven't bought something yet, but you still might want to use it, this is what lets you do that. And let me just see where the chat has gone. Sorry, putting full screen has apparently like gotten rid of the chat. Just going to pause there for a second. This is just to send a discount code. So the discount code is SEPT35, September 35. And let me just make sure that this is actually the right code. I will go back to more Q&A after this, by the way. I just wanted to finish this sort of description of the courses. So all you got to do to use it is you go to a seminar. Say you want to do LG. You can add to the cart. You can check out. And then you put the coupon in here. And it takes 35% off, so it amounts to $129. And these come with a satisfaction guarantee as well. So if you use it and for whatever reason it turns out it's just like not your thing, which is fine. Like everyone's brain works differently. A bunch of people love these. It may not be your thing. You won't really know until you try it. But there's absolutely no issue. You just send me an email and be like, oh, you know what, that didn't work for me. Can I get my money back? And I'll just send it back. So there's really no risk. You'll know within like an hour or two if they're for you, and they're only 5 hours long total. And I'm sure that like if there's even like one tip in there that helps you deal with a certain type of question or go faster on something, like it can still make the difference. Because if you get like just 1 point out of doing this, if that pushes you over a school's median, it can actually make the difference in terms of admission or not, or a scholarship or not. Like that's how seriously the schools view their medians. If you just get 1 or 2 points up and you're above their median for admission, that can mean like 70,000 in scholarships. Like it's crazy how score dependent the admissions process is, but it's every point is worth getting. And also, if you start with one and then realize like, oh, you know, I think the others would be helpful, you can, this bundle of all three is actually discounted. So if you want to upgrade to that, I can give you a discount code to, basically it's as if you use the 35% discount on the whole cheaper bundle price. So you can either buy all three at a discount now, or you can get one and then upgrade later. I won't mind that. And if you are studying for November or think you might continue studying through November, it's fine. You can buy these now and still use them later. You have 12 months of access, so it's not an issue. Does anyone have any questions about the seminars? I'm just going to get some water, but you can ask those and I'll answer when I come back. Okay, one person asks, how would you recommend making a study plan between now and September test that makes use of your master's seminars while making sure not to burn out before test day? So the deal with burnout is I think you'll know whether or not you're at risk for it. So if you're not really feeling burnt out, then you can continue studying for like 4 hours a day and you'll be fine. I say the burnout thing to just because I know that like there's a percentage of people, maybe like 15%, that through their own efforts have basically been working too hard and have burned themselves out and need to stop and take a break. But if that's not you, then you don't really have to worry about that. The main thing that adding a master's seminar would do is it would just change how you're working. So in that, rather than just doing drills, you might like watch the LG mastery seminar for 5 hours and then do some more LG drills trying to apply the stuff in it, and then you might go back to the seminar and rewatch it again and see if you got like extra insights on certain games. In other words, you might try a game that's covered in the seminar, watch the videos, try it again, watch the videos again, and see if you're doing all the things that I highlighted. So it wouldn't be a massive change. It's basically just if you were already doing LG or LR drills with certain question types, you would just add this in and use the videos as a reference to guide your drilling. And someone asks, can we see what these look like in practice? Yeah, I will actually just like, I need to make some video excerpts of these. I haven't yet. But I will share my screen and just go into one of the seminars. Okay, So here's the LR Mastery Seminar. Oh, sorry. So each of them start with an introduction, which you can either use or not use. A lot of people find them extremely valuable. Some people, well, basically the introductions, if you've read my series of articles called like How to Go Faster at Logic Games or Logical Reasoning, the introduction is basically an expanded version of that, because those articles really were just my own method for how I go faster. So obviously in the Master Seminar, I'm going to say similar things. So depending on, if you've already read those and you think they make sense and you don't need any, like it was already super clear, then you don't need to watch it again necessarily. But if you want the video expansion, then you can. So that's one aspect of it. Then after that, I go through specific games and passages or questions for logical reasoning. And like I said, I did them timed, and then I show what I'm doing timed. So they're not the same as an explanation, and you want to approach them differently, as in like, and I would recommend you do the questions first and you take notes on how you do it, and then look at how I do it and see, like, did he notice things that I didn't notice? How could I learn to notice those? How can I make it intuitive? And like keep repeating those questions until you can break them down in the same way that I did. So here's the LR Mastery Seminar. So for example, this video covers flaw questions. I'll just like, underneath it shows the questions that are covered in this video. So you could do this list of questions before, and I tried to pick them from like 62 to 66 so that I wasn't taking like a large number of prep tests. And these are recent enough that they're useful, but not so recent that they're the ones that people save for like full-time prep tests. And then in the video,
okay, so this session is an entirely record.
I've got like a bit of a description of flaw types.
Down into thinking like, okay,
and then questions themselves. And I have written up at the top like what question I'm covering. So if you want to like go through the video to like jump to find something, it's pretty easy to see like when I've changed questions. And then I'm just
with the results
here like,
so this is mixing up fact-based stuff with goal-based stuff. C takes for granted that everyone
that was just me walking through some answers, but I will at some point make a video extra. But basically I'm just describing the main things that I see, like these were factors in the question that let me find something quickly, like key language, and I was just pointing out like what I'm noticing. So there's a bunch of stuff like that. Hopefully that makes sense. I have never actually done like a live demo of these, so this was like pretty unrehearsed.
To account for the fact that there might be a variety of geographical reasons.
Oh, and you can also watch these on like different speed levels, if you prefer. I know some people like to like go at different speeds. Okay, so I want to ask how long the access is. 12 months. And it basically is forever. The only reason that it's 12 months is I don't want a bunch of zombie accounts. But if you start studying again next year and you said like, hey, I'd like to use this course I bought, like just email me. It's fine. I'll extend the access. And actually for the person that asked like walking through a typical master seminar, did that answer the question? Or did you still have other questions? Oh, great. Anything else? Actually, the one who asked about it, is there anything else you'd like to know before buying it, or are you thinking about getting it? Okay, someone asks about 62 to 66. Should we make sure we've done all of 62 to 64 before we watch the seminar, or is it useful to have some of them undone so we can try with your tips? Good question. I think I would give it a try yourself, because for each of these lessons, there are some that are, you can just see all of them. Like you don't need to take the tests fully timed. If you haven't done these but you have enough prep tests left, you could just jump through and do these specific questions. And you yourself will know, I think, whether or not it's more useful to you to do the question without guidance, then watch the video, then do it again, or whether or not it's more useful to watch the video with the walkthrough and then try it yourself on your own. Like, my intuition is you'll get more out of it by doing them first and then watching it, but everybody's different, and you may find that you do better the other way. But you definitely don't need to do the test time before starting the seminars. I think it's enough just to do whatever questions are listed in the video that you're going to do. Did that answer the question? I'm just going to stop sharing because I think someone's... Yeah, there's just some people doing the Q&A. I have not figured out how to get to the chat while I'm sharing screen. So try and keep questions to the Q&A, but I'm just going to answer a couple from the chat here. Okay, someone asks, if I'm planning to take the LSAT sometime in 2019 and just have started studying, how would be the best way to start? With the course or start with the book? Or start with books? I think probably the best way is actually to start with a course. But you don't actually have to decide. Like, this sale lets you use the courses later. So if you'd rather start with a book like the LSAT Trainer, like a lot of people use my courses and the book like the LSAT Trainer. But if you want to use the LSAT Trainer and get them later, like, this is still a good time to buy the courses because you get them at a discount and you can then use them later. Whereas they'd be full price if you're starting sometime later, so you would be spending like $150 more that you could have saved just by using it right now. But I think a course is a good way to start because something that I hear sometimes is someone will like read through a whole book and then start taking prep tests, and they're like, oh geez, like I studied for like a month with this book and then my score didn't improve, or I got like a low score. And I think what can happen is that if you just start by reading a textbook, the textbook actually isn't that useful without having done timed prep tests. And if you do the LSAT course that I have, it assigns a bunch of prep tests to work with and it gets you working from questions from the get-go. Then I think books are like a very good reference alongside of that. But I think the course gives you good habits and you get to see someone like actually talking through stuff. Like, there's a aspect of seeing questions being talked about that lets you see some factors of it that's hard to get across in writing. Like, I find in my own written explanations, sometimes I'm like writing out like this long thing for how to do something, but it's actually like a fast process if you can just say a few words describing it, but to put it in writing has to be longer. So I think there's value in video, and it's nice to start with that earlier, especially now that there's a discount, which is SEPT35 for 35% off anything on the course, on the site. And someone asked, did the stream already start? Yes, it did already start, but if you want to see the earlier stuff, there'll be a recording sent out in the next day or two where you can catch that. And someone asks, where will you rewatch the webinar? I'll probably post it to the site, but if you signed up for this, which you did if you're in this webinar, then you'll be sent an email to a video stream of the recording. So don't worry about that. No need to email me or anything. Within a couple days, you will get a recording. Okay, anyone else have any questions about the mastery seminars before? Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to answer just a few other questions that people had before I started talking about those. But if you have any other mastery seminar questions or discount questions, then just go ahead and ask them. Okay, someone asked for logic games. How do you know whether you should spend time making inferences for your main diagram or whether you should simply just running through needless hypotheticals and go to the questions? So, the difference is you should not be doing hypotheticals. That's the difference. You should focus on what must be true. And if something must be true, then that's when it's an inference that goes on the main diagram. So in other words, like, let's say you've got a thing where it's like t can only go first or seventh, or t must go first or seventh. Well, that gives you a clear two scenarios. One where t's in 1, one where t's in 2. And as a matter of habit, the way the LSAT works is if you split that into two scenarios, there'll usually be other deductions that you can add to these, and so it's worth doing. Whereas if you got something like T can't go first, then you're left with 6 scenarios. T could go second, T could go third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, or seventh. And there's no point to drawing all that. That just falls into could be true. And in general, when you're adding deductions to diagrams, that was describing like a split scenario. But any other inferences, like in my explanations, you'll see I chain inferences together and make further deductions. Like, let me just go to one of them, for example. I'll pick a test that's like not too recent, in case someone's using these. And I don't know what this one is, but let's just have a look. So I've drawn this. Then you see I've drawn like some not rules. I've drawn like a further rule. So all of these things that I'm drawing on here are just all like must be true things. I haven't drawn any like, oh, who could go third, who could go fifth. That stuff rarely matters. You see what I have drawn on here is a rule where like gas and satellite, since they can't go first, second, or third, I drew this little dividing line and I put them back here to show that they are somewhere in fourth, fifth, and sixth. That always must be true. So this isn't a hypothetical. This must be true. And that's the difference. And water and landscape, water has to have landscape after it. So here, that means that after W would be L, and so you can't have W in fourth, because then you'd have W, L, G, and S in the 3 spots 4, 5, 6. If that didn't make sense, you can watch this after the webinar. That might be like a little bit much to take in just like watching live, but the point I want to get across is all these things that I've drawn here have to be true all the time. And if you can't find things that have to be true all the time, then you should just go on to the questions. There is no point to just sitting and thinking or sitting and trying drawings. Save that for the questions. Someone asks, what do you suggest if you're narrowing down between 2 questions on LR but are picking the wrong one? So first of all, I would check if you're actually doing it. What I find a lot of the case is like people only review the wrong questions, so they don't notice the times when they're stuck between 2 and they pick the right one. So what you should do in advance is like put a square or something or a star beside the questions where you're stuck between 2, and then after the fact, see if you're always choosing the wrong one or if you're, in fact, choosing it half the time. My guess is you're choosing the wrong one half of the time, not all of the time. If you are actually choosing it all of the time, then, I don't know, pick what you would pick and then do the opposite. It's a hard question, but my experience in these cases is you're not choosing the wrong one all the time, you just think you are. And so you have to measure everything. Someone asks, how is your LSAT course? What year was that? Interesting question. I did the course in 2016, but nothing's really changed in the sense of like, you know, I don't really change my methods that much over the years. I've been doing this long enough that like there are no radical changes in how I approach the LSAT, and the test hasn't changed very much. I'm also using 62 to 66 in that course, so everything is still like up to date and valid. But I recorded it in 2016. So if you want to see a slightly younger version of me and be taught by that, then that's the course to get. And as for like how the course is, it's basically the difference between the course and mastery seminars is on the course I don't assume you have any LSAT knowledge, so when I introduce something like I'll explain it fully. In the mastery seminars, I'm assuming that you already know stuff like sufficient conditions, logic game types, and basic to intermediate knowledge, so that I don't have to slow down and I can just go quickly and assume that you know what I'm talking about. And so I don't waste time in it. Whereas the LSAT course is if you need like more of a full overview of things. So like if you've already done something like the LSAT trainer, you probably want the mastery seminars, just because the course will be rehashing stuff you know. Like, I mean, if you're scoring in the 140s, then you probably should take the course, just because that would mean that like you probably haven't fully absorbed the stuff from a book like the trainer, and the course would benefit. But if you're in the 150s and you've already done another course or the LSAT trainer or something, then I would just do the mastery seminars. especially if it's just like a few weeks out. Someone asks, they ask, what if we buy both, further discount? I never really thought about it, because not that many people do buy both, but some do, and I probably should make a product on my site called like buy everything that is a further discount. So yeah, I guess if you want to buy both of those, I would give you 50% off. I don't have a code for that, but I probably could make one actually. Let me just stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to make a code so that if you buy all the mastery seminars and the LSAT course, you get half off. Someone asked, I'll get back to that code in a minute, but I'm just going to answer the next question. Someone asks how to work on going faster. So they're missing the last 3 questions of every section. How can I go faster? So going faster is basically a function of being better. There's not really a thing as like LSAT speed in general. But I'm going to send you an article called How to Go Faster on the LSAT. And this is actually... What the... That's weird. I can't seem to submit links in the Q&A. So I'm going to send an article by the chat called How to Go Faster at the LSAT. And... Did I send the right thing? Yeah. And you'll find in there links to other articles. If you also go to my intro page, you can find all of them that cover how to go faster in each section. But really, I just titled these because that way, because that's what people are expecting. But really, getting better is mostly about, or getting faster is mostly about getting better. And so these are really articles on like how to get better at logic games or how to be more efficient at logic games. And I would say like try those articles. I hope they help you go faster. If you find they are useful, then you probably should sign up for at least one of the mastery seminars, because the mastery seminars are basically like an expanded version of those articles plus walkthroughs of specific questions applying the concepts found in them. Which occurs to me I should probably advertise each mastery seminar on those articles as that, because I've never done that. So webinar's giving all kinds of ideas. One sec. But I would read those articles as like a good free start for like how to go faster. Okay, I'm going to make this coupon code, but if anyone has more questions, go ahead and ask. Oh. Okay, someone asks, how likely is it that we'll get a real curveball logic game? That's my biggest fear at this point. I know the July test just reused a curveball game from a few Februarys ago, so I would say a curveball is pretty likely. My theory on logic games is that like these used to be the hardest section of the LSAT actually, but then 7 Sage came out with their free explanations. Like that was about 6 years ago, and once those came out, people were just able to sort of memorize common game types and be better at logic games than they should have been, if that makes sense. Because, you know, the LSAT is not a regurgitation test. So if people are able to just memorize game types and regurgitate, then it's actually not doing its job. And so, how to put it? yeah, the test is not doing its job, so they had to, in some way, get back to testing whether or not people like just had the fundamental skills that they needed to do well in the LSAT. And what they've done is they've just started introducing games that don't match the format of previous LSATs, but that are testing the same skills. And the important thing is they're not actually fundamentally harder than regular logic games. They're just different. So if you've been only relying on memorization, that's where you're going to have trouble. So how you prep for these is I would stop using explanations for logic games at this point. If you already know them pretty well, just stop using explanations. I mean, I make an exception for something like the Mastery Seminar because that's showing you how to go faster and so on. But when you finish a game, don't go read my explanation or watch the 7-stage YouTube video. Instead, redo that game by yourself and try and figure out how to do better at it just on your own. And this is training the skill of learning to do something that you didn't know how to do. And that is the skill that lets you deal with a new, unusual game. They're not hard, they're different. So when you see a new, different one, don't panic and think, oh my god, I didn't study how to do this. Like, of course you didn't. No one did. They're new. Just take a few breaths and think about how to organize the information and remind yourself that they can't make something so hard that nobody can do it. It's not a super hard thing. It's just different. But I think it's fairly likely that there will be one. I actually found, as for the people that asked about buying everything, I actually found like a product that I made but haven't been advertising. This offers the course plus the mastery seminars, and if you use SEPT35, you'll get 35% off. So I think it amounts to like it's actually a more than 50% discount on buying everything. Because I just tried to work it out. Normally the course plus the mastery seminars would be $9.49, so if you take off 35%, it would be $6.16. Whereas if you take $7.99 and take off 35%, it would be $5.19. Oh no, it's not. It's not a full 50% discount, but you know what? If you want to buy this product and use the 35% discount code, then I'll just do like a little refund to bring the price down to 50%, which would be $9.49 divided by 2 is $4.75. So be $50 less. So if you buy this thing that I just sent in the chat and use the 35% discount code, it'll go down to $5.19. Then just message me and I'll take off the other $50. Or send me your email if you're interested in that, and I'll have time after the webinar to make the bundle 50 discount code. But if you buy it now, I'll take care of the pricing. I think who was interested in that? There was oh yeah, and someone who asked, would I be able to have access for a year if you bought everything? Yes. The default access time is for a year, and you can extend it after that if you're still reading. If you're still studying, so it's not a problem. So don't worry, if you'll have plenty of time to use these. Did that answer the questions? There were 2 people who were interested in buying everything. Did that answer your questions, or was there anything else you wanted to know? It was Barry and Sarah, I think. Let me know. I'm gonna answer some other questions. What should we do if we come across RC passage which we find hard to understand? So I guess I've got a 2-part answer there. One is like, are you generally finishing all 4 passages? Then basically you've got to do it. You know, if you're really slow in RC and you only do 3 passages, then it's legitimate simply to skip. But I'm assuming most people listening to this want to finish everything. So what you should do is remind yourself that like they can't have made something not understandable. And you know, if you picked up a medical journal and started reading some article on cholesterol, it would be very legitimate for you not to be able to understand that, because there's a lot of like technical stuff in there and it's not meant for outsiders. But that's not what LSAT RC is like. They have enough information that anybody with a university education can read it without specialized knowledge. So you should reread. So say you read a paragraph and it makes no sense. Reread it again and look for the cues they give. Sorry, I'm just kind of hoarse. You know, they won't just say like hemoglobin diribosomerites. That I just made that up, by the way. They'll say something like hemoglobin diribosomerites, the agent in the blood that helps blah blah blah. And that's the bit you focus on. Like you're like, okay, whatever this hemoglobin, whatever, it's the thing in the blood that helps manage sugar. I don't know. They'll have a simpler description that explains what's going on. So don't let yourself be like thrown off by the big words. Look for the simple description and look for the structural words. And reread it. And don't move on with an understanding. That's a recipe for just being even more confused. If you get to paragraph 3 and you haven't understood paragraphs 1 and 2, you're lost. But if you reread paragraph 1, and rereading is always faster than reading. If you read paragraph 1 and fully understand it, you're going to be able to understand paragraph 2 better, and it'll speed you up. This is, I think, like what throws people off. That you have, not only do you have time to slow down and reread, that makes you go faster, because you go faster on subsequent paragraphs, and you go faster on the questions. So you're not saving time by rushing through something you don't understand. You are slowing yourself down. If you don't understand, slow down, reread, and give yourself time to understand. It'll speed you up. Someone asked, do I recommend writing notes or underlining on RC? I mean, I don't do either. If it helps you, do it. And that's basically the extent of my recommendations. People's brains are different. So if you underlined all of your textbooks in college, then I'm assuming that would also help you on reading comp. And writing notes may help. But don't start doing it just because you hear about people doing it. Because I don't need to do it. It doesn't help me. It would slow me down. So it depends on whether or not it specifically helps you. I would say if you do it, keep them more minimal. Because it's easy to get distracted into like writing stuff rather than actually solving the questions and understanding. But they can help. Okay, someone says, I'm planning to buy this package around September 10th. Can I still use this promotion that week, please? Should I email you? So I guess the question there is, are you waiting to buy because of like a financial thing, like I don't know, like a paycheck's coming in then or whatever? Then in that case, yeah, that's fine. Just send me an email, explain the situation, and I can make some exception to allow this to be used later. But if you're just delaying, I would prefer you do it now than later, just because I set a deadline of Tuesday for the discount code, and it's just easier to track. Like I said, you can buy it, then you've got like a week of a satisfaction guarantee where you can look at it and review it. And if the issue was like you wouldn't have time to look at it until the 10th, and so you didn't want to go through like miss the satisfaction guarantee period, that's fine. Just like send me an email when you buy to say like, hey, I'm buying this now because of the discount, but I won't be able to use it until September 10th. Would it be fine to like extend the guarantee period till then? Like that's okay. Just don't like email like 4 months after buying a course and be like, hey, I'd like my money back, because I have no idea whether or not you actually use the course in that case. But extending the satisfaction guarantee period is fine. But in general, yeah, better and simpler to buy it now. But if there's like a financial reason that you can't do it till the 10th, just email me and I'll make like a one-off exception and open up like a window for you to buy it later. And I just sent my email. It's oh yeah, if anyone does have any questions about that, Graeme@LSATHacks.com. If you have questions about the code, which is September 15, or the mastery seminars, which I'll send a link to, you can email me. Or, I mean, you can just ask them now too. But if you have follow-up questions, then you can ask them. So I'm just going through other questions here. Okay, someone asks, what would you suggest for someone who's able to get all the logic games right in 3 games, but is unable to get to the 4th? Can I practice increasing my timing without jeopardizing my accuracy? Well, first of all, I would say you're actually like an ideal candidate for the LG Mastery Seminar. Like, I could not think of a better suited person to buy any Mastery Seminar than that specific use case, because that is entirely what they're about. They're about being more efficient, going faster, while maintaining accuracy. And it's 5 hours long. You'll find out immediately whether or not it helps you, and it might even help you go faster immediately. So I would strongly recommend that you just get that. It's $129, and if you don't like it, you can get your money back. There's like no downside, very little time downside. My answer would be just get that. But short of that, if like let's say you have no money and buying something is not an option, then I would recommend checking out the article that I linked about how to go faster on the LSAT and reading those tips for logic games. I've got actually a diagram in that article which you may find useful, just showing. I'm going to go back to screen sharing now. I think I'm answering this question a lot. I don't actually know how it works. But, oops. But for example, on my How to Go Faster on Logic Games article, I have a diagram showing where I do my diagrams. And like this, for example, can help. Oh, actually, someone just asked, can I say the discount code one more time? It's SEPT35. This can help you go faster, for example, like just doing this, like clear diagrams and putting them in the right position on the page. Like notice the diagrams are right beside the questions, and this is clear and well ordered. That alone can speed you up. The article covers this in more depth. I don't have time to like fully go into this, but I would say if you have $129, I think in your case, the Mastery Seminar is like very much a good idea. But barring that, check out the article. And the other thing that I recommend is repeating games, because people always focus on like, how do I get better on the hard game or getting stuff wrong? But part of being good at logic games is actually just going really, really fast on the easy games. If you can do an easy game in 5 minutes, then you have time to go slower and brute force some stuff on a harder game. So I would redo games, even easy games, and I would just think like, could I go faster? Could I go faster? Could I go faster? Where are the shortcuts? I hope that helps. Did I answer your question? I think we are out of questions, so I will end the webinar there. There will be a recording coming within a couple of days. It sometimes takes a little while to process, but rest assured it will come. And thank you all for attending, and good luck in September. Remember to look over all of the LSAT test day stuff and practice using it. And then if you focus on one area, there's still time to make progress. So pick the area that is most improvable, and good luck.